Okay, we had this Bible study question come in. In Genesis 1:3, God called light to be. If the universe was created 16 billion years ago, before this time when he said light be, then why was there no light on earth at that time? And where was the light before this? What happened to it? Well, we thank Terry B. for this very good question. The answer may shock you. Most churches agree that God, or Jesus, ended Satan's first rebellion about 66.6 million years ago, when he was thrown out of heaven and thrown back to earth like lightning by the archangel Michael, thrown back at that time. And there was a large asteroid hit in what created the Gulf of Mexico, or part of the Gulf of Mexico at that time. What they failed to notice is Satan's second rebellion, which caused an ice age starting about 12,600 years ago. In this rebellion, Satan wanted to ensure that no life could live on the surface of the earth. He caused more than 80% of the Earth's atmosphere to be ripped off the surface and brought up above the normal space level where it would cool down, so that when it fell back to Earth, what we'd have is a super freeze. Because the average temperature up there is around minus 270. It's, you can't even lick a popsicle at that coldness, okay? So what happened, everything that was on the surface of the earth froze. And that's why you can find mastodons with food in their mouth. And goats and all that stuff, they find frozen in the ice in the north, still frozen. The ice was piled up in some areas up to 3 miles high. Well, that takes more than a day to melt. But then Satan established a heavy dust cloud between the earth and the moon to block the sun. So the sun can't get through, it can't melt that ice. If it doesn't melt the ice, there can't be any life on the surface. Right? Well, there's an acute shortage of dust on the moon. He may have used the dust that was on the moon to create a barrier between the sun and the earth, and the moon would be on the other side. And that's why the moon could not be seen for the night, because there was a barrier. When the atmosphere was brought into space, about 10 to 12% of the oxygen levels were lost to space. Before this event, Earth had an average of 32% to 33% oxygen in its atmosphere. That allowed for things to grow into giant size. we're at right now around 20%, which is, we're right at the minimum that will allow our brains to function. And if you do something like smoke, or you cut down the ability of your brain to function. If it can't contact the mind, you start going senile. And then, when there was the third rebellion, which ended in the ocean flood, we see that another 3% dropped in the oxygen levels. So as it started to recover a little bit, between the time of the creation of man and the fall of the ocean flood, of that third rebellion, the levels of oxygen in the air had went from roughly 22-23% up to 26%. As soon as the ocean flood came, it dropped back down to 21%. So it wiped it out. And this is why we have so little oxygen in our atmosphere today. Now, without CO2 levels, plants cannot grow big enough or productive enough to feed our growing world population. So that's why they're telling people all this big lie about global warming. They want to starve, they want to cause a famine, so they can justify a world war and eliminate vast numbers of people. It's not a reality. Do you realize that without CO2, our plants are starving? They can't produce the nutrient and the proteins that mankind needs and the animal life needs, because the carbon dioxide level is way too low in our atmosphere, and has been for 4,900 years. It's way too low. So even with the increased sunlight that we're getting and increased warming, unless the oceans can release the CO2 that's built up in them, that they've absorbed, we're on a dying planet. It cannot sustain the population. That's why the New World Order is trying to convince everybody about global warming, so they can eliminate all but 550 million people, the ones they think are worthy. Now, also, stars have been emitting light for at least 16 billion years. It was only when Satan caused a rebellion that caused 1/3 of our universe to fall into the veil of darkness. Okay. Jesus, as the Creator God, had to call forth light so that light could be seen through the dark universe that we live in. He cleaned the dust that was the barrier set up, cleaned it out of the way. Things could normalize. And because the dark universe is being sped up to the speed of light, it's currently running, expanding at 83% of the speed of light. Light travels at 186,000 miles per second. We see less and less of this universe because as it moves faster, it breaks down. It hits the Tachyon fields, it's totally destroyed. It looks like it folds in on itself and it vanishes, which is exactly what happens. So, that we see less and less of this universe, because as it moves into this destruction zone, it also has a death zone. It can no longer reform as matter. It is because of Genesis 1:3 that we understand why Jesus said, this universe is passing away, and a new universe and a new earth will be brought forth, created. So again, we thank Gary for this very good question.